Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the first annual UPenn Neuroscience Public Lecture. Thank you all for coming. This event is part of Brain Awareness Week, which is an annual week-long event that brings together scientists, clinicians, educators, and journalists to raise awareness about the progress and benefits of brain research. In addition to tonight's lecture, there's some very cool events going on at the Franklin Institute, a lot of hands-on activities, stuff for kids. Dr. Jayatri Das, she's the chief bioscientist at the Franklin Institute. Is she here? There you are. She can stand up for a second. She'll be here. She'll be here with us tonight after the program, and she'll be happy to tell you either about the events tomorrow or the upcoming Your Brain exhibit, which opens this June at the Franklin Institute. Okay. Before we get started, though, I'd like to give you all a brief, very brief history a brief overview of the history of neuroscience. Okay. 25,000 years ago, in the late Stone Age, early humans performed trepanation, which is the practice of drilling holes into the skull, and it was a surgical procedure used to cure mental ailments. The bone that was trepaned out of the skull was kept and worn by prehistoric people as a charm to ward off evil spirits. And trepanation is actually the oldest documented surgical procedure for which we have archaeological evidence. Also of note, this surgical procedure was done up until the 1600s in Europe, just to give you an idea of how far we've come. So, thousands of years later, the ancient Egyptians were really the first to rigorously study the brain. They routinely extracted the brain in preparation for mummification using surgical tools that are seen, like those seen here. And what we have here, the Edwin Smith Papyrus, is actually a collection of 48 case studies that contains realistic anatomical, physiological, and pathological observations of the major organs of the body. It actually contains the first known description of the anatomy of the human brain. And as a matter of fact, the word brain was used for the very first time in written language in this papyrus. However, despite these meticulous observations, the ancient Egyptians believed that the heart, not the brain, was the source of consciousness and intelligence. The Greek physician Hippocrates, he was the first to challenge this view, and he believed that the brain was not only responsible for sensory perception, but also was the seat of human intelligence. And he described his observations in his biggest work, I would say, the Corpus Hippocratum. He's also the guy that the Hippocratic Oath was named after. However, he didn't have the necessary scientific tools or techniques to really bolster the evidence to his claim. So, consequently, for nearly 2,000 years, the study of the brain was relegated primarily to the area of philosophy. Then, in the late 19th century, modern neuroscience was born with the pioneering works of neuroscientists Santiago Ramon y Cajal and Camillo Golgi. At the time that these two scientists were active, this is the late 1800s, there was an ongoing debate about the organization and architecture of the brain. One camp of researchers, which included Golgi, believed that the brain consisted of a large network of tissue, which they called the reticulum, and that there were no really discrete elements of the brain. The other camp, which Cajal was a part of, believed that the brain was made up of distinct elements or cells, that he believed. Cajal, using a staining technique that Golgi actually developed, he was able to identify individual brain cells, which he called neurons. This monumental achievement led to the realization that the neuron, a cell, is the functional unit of the human brain, which ended the debate between Cajal and Golgi. What's ironic, though, is that Cajal could have never done this work except for Golgi's staining technique, which is still used today. So, in 1906, Cajal and Golgi both shared the Nobel Prize for their work. And these are some of Cajal's drawings of neurons that he observed after staining under a microscope. In the second half of the 20th century, major advances in molecular biology, like the discovery of the DNA, as well as major advances in electrophysiology, which is recording the electrical activity of neurons, they sparked a vigorous study of the brain. Currently, neuroscience is a highly interdisciplinary science encompassing the fields of biology, medicine, chemistry, physics, computer science, mathematics, linguistics, psychology, philosophy, you name it. Over the past several decades, neuroscientists have discovered a vast amount about the human brain. Among many of the groundbreaking findings, neuroscientists have discovered where and how memories are stored in the brain. We've created brain imaging tools to see the brain's response to sight, sounds, and other sensations, and they've elucidated some of the biological basis of many of the psychiatric disorders, and have developed or begun to develop pharmacological treatments for some of these disorders. However, despite all the advances that we have with neuroscience research, there's still a whole lot that we don't know. Here at Penn, we have some fantastic research going on, and an event like Brain Awareness Week gives us the opportunity to share some of that research with you guys. We got a great program for you all tonight. Tonight we'll hear from 4 world-renowned faculty members, and they didn't pay me $20 to say that. That's actually true. We'll hear from 4 world-renowned faculty members about the latest advances in research on obesity, decision-making, drug addiction, and neuroengineering. After the program, there's a reception, and you're all, of course, invited to stay, and it'll be held just outside the auditorium here.